Hey friends, this is Paul Killens with my excellent co-host Paul Geigel. Paul, say hello.
Hey, what's up?
And today we're going to be talking about the friend of ours that if you listened to the last episode, you knew that we were kind of down because we had gotten news that a friend of ours had passed away. And he was kind of a catalyst for, not kind of, he was a huge part of launching Eliza, and the part that he played in it was magnificent and great. And so we wanted to hop on here today and not just dedicate the episode to him, but really talk through his story and everything like that. So, Paul, do you want to lead in with? I mean, I wasn't there the first day y'all met, so
Yeah. So it was actually the second time I went out on the street. I was looking for a guy named Todd, and I ran into Brad, and Brad led us back to Eliza Park where he was staying across in an encampment. And we formed a relationship with him and told him our intentions. And slowly over time, he was our biggest promoter, and he literally, got the word out. So yeah, he was a real pivotal part of the launch of the ministry in the movement.
yeah. So, what was his middle name? His name is Brad Palmer.
Michael.
Brad Michael Palmer,
Yeah.
and um, he passed away Monday, February 24th.
Mm-hmm.
And we had actually visited him on Saturday the 22nd, but we'll talk about that in just a second.
Mm-hmm.
So you meet Brad, and he kind of introduces you or brings you around to some of the other people.
Mm-hmm.
What did you first think of him when you met him?
Oh, when I first saw him, I was actually kind of scared because he looked like kind of like a neo-Nazi, and he had the shaved head and the combat boots on, and definitely not a friendly look. So, and I even looked over to the person that was with me. I said, "This is going to be interesting." He actually turned out to be really friendly and kind. So, the outside didn't match the inside.
Yeah, for sure. He's got tats all up and
Mm-hmm.
down his arms and stuff. He's like full sleeved out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be kind of intimidating, and he's tall. Like he
Mm-hmm.
is tall. And so that's interesting. And so we meet him, kind of scary. He leads us to another thing. Tell us about some of the developments over time. Like, what were some defining moments in your relationship? And then I'll talk about some in mine with him.
Well, of course, he introduced me to the gang, and Khalif, who we talked about previously, was like the moment where we saw that somebody could actually, their life could change by being influenced by us. And so, me and Brad from the very beginning had ambition. I mean, we talked about it every time we were together, and he even talked with his mother about the great things that he saw himself doing in our organization. And so, and there's no doubt in my heart that if he was still alive right now, we would be moving in that direction. Maybe not right away, but sometime soon he would be part of us. And he would tell the people in the group that, I helped start this. Several times when people would start to override, he would put them in their place and say, look, I know these guys better than anybody here. So he was our biggest defender too.
Yeah, so he's introduces us to the gang, and he defends us to the gang, which, you do have to defend yourself because you don't have any cred, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You walk
Yeah.
in there, and they're used to people giving them stuff. Like, let's be real. They're
Yeah.
used to people giving them stuff one time and never seeing that face ever again. So that
Right.
can be, it's hard to build trust. And so to have someone that sleeps next to them say like, no, they're for real and they're going to come back is really, really influential. And so he was great in that. The first time I ever heard about Brad was there was some some problems in the camp, and he is actually, at the time, he was the biggest influence for the sermon that you asked me to preach. And
Yeah.
just like every story, right? Like, we love Brad, and just like every story, there's ups and downs, right? So
Hmm.
we're not trying to badmouth him or anything, but we're going to be honest to it. The same way we're honest about King David, we're going to be honest about Brad. And so
Right.
there's a bit of a theft issue going on. I don't know the
Hmm.
details of it, but essentially Paul called me in to preach the 10 Commandments because of stealing going on. And
Hmm.
so Brad was one of those culprits, and he was the one that Paul had his eye on as I was preaching, when he says that, I think in an earlier episode, we've already mentioned that Geigel said that I took the air out of the room. Well, he was looking at Brad. Brad was the
Hmm.
one who had air, and then the air was gone.
Hmm.
But it's actually fantastic to bring that up, because there is change that takes place in people's lives
Hmm.
because they listen to the gospel of Christ.
Right.
And it was proclaimed through the 10 Commandments that day, right? And I mean, you tell me, Paul. I'm not saying I saved the day,
Hmm.
but I think the issue was diminished afterwards.
Yeah, summertime, everybody saw a change in him physically, like and he was still in active. Um, he was
Addiction.
still, yeah, he was still in addiction, and he was fighting back. So something in him started to fight, and you could see it. You could see it, and people, Steve Harris was saying he looks different, and other people were saying, hey, yeah, we can see the change happening, but he was still in still in the dark spot in his life. And yeah, somewhere around summertime it started to get traction. So right about this, right about the same time you came out there, he was hearing the gospel pretty regularly. He would miss one or two gatherings, up until about August, and then after August, he was there almost every Sunday. So from August until Thanksgiving, right about the time where he had his attack.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Do you want to talk about anything before we get to the heart attack?
Um, he was he would speak out, and there was times where he would, we wouldn't have a preacher sometimes, so we would just do a free for all where people would share what's on their heart, and just it was kind of like a therapeutic thing more than a gospel thing. And Brad would bring a lot out about holding himself accountable, and
Hmm.
so he really was trying. That's the really heartbreaking thing, is it's kind of like seeing somebody caught by a great white. You they're fighting as hard as they can, but it's just something much, much bigger than what they have the power over. And anybody that's ever struggled with addiction knows that you need a higher power. I mean, you cannot do it yourself. That's the definition of addiction: is something stronger than you has you. Hmm.
So then, how did you first hear about the heart attack?
Well, he went missing, and I texted him, and he had told me, there was a lot going on during that time period, because there was a lot of new people came into the group. Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly. I can't remember exactly how we found
Yeah,
out. Yeah,
that's all good.
yeah.
So he did end up having a heart attack, and the
Hmm.
story we later learned was that, like, he was with some people in the camp, and he was telling them, like, call the
Hmm.
ambulance.
Hmm.
And they just the ambulance pulled up at, like, the street corner or something, and it turns out he had a heart attack. And so that was actually the a huge moment, because after he went out and got taken care of in the hospital, he realized how close he is to death all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where we saw like the biggest change, because he knew
Yeah.
he was close to the end, um, with the
Yeah.
lifestyle that he was living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had some kind of oh, that let me back up a little bit. So he had developed an infection sometime around the time people were saying he was changing. He would pull up his legs and show it's called edema medically. It's taking on a fluid, and at the time that he had his attack, they took out 30 pounds of fluid from his body. So that's like 4 or 5 gallons. That's a lot of fluid to come out of one person. So
Mm.
he had that for, wow, at least a month and a half, and it caught up with him. So he was very sick with some kind of it was like a cellulitis, I think, some type of infection, and it was probably had something to do with the IV stuff, needles. I'm thinking,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So, um, this is when he was really kind of changing the script, not just for himself but for Eliza. Like, we were seeing how we viewed, I think we viewed it as a second chance. I
Mm.
think that it was a hopeful moment, even though it was, there's despair in a friend having a heart attack. I think we viewed it as a hopeful moment because he could change the trajectory of his life
Mhm.
and move on from being homeless and whatnot. And
Mhm.
so he decided not to go back to the camp. He went and lived at an Oxford home, which is for those of you who might not know, it's like a self-run addiction recovery sober living house. So people who suffer from addiction kind of all group up in the house, and naturally there are people that have lived there longer. So some people may live at the house for like 9 years, 7 years, and then you'll have newer guys move in who've only been clean for like 30 days, 60 days, things like that.
Mhm.
And so then he moved in there, and then that's when we met up at the pizza place,
Right.
and kind of
Mhm.
caught up with him there. And so we had like just a little celebration pizza party at a local pizzeria,
Mhm.
and just enjoyed spending time with him um,
Mhm.
there, and kind of catching up and getting the details on like what happened and
Mhm.
how did you move after you got out of the hospital and whatnot.
Mhm. Yeah, it was a really exciting time because he was free from all that, and of course he had a heart condition which he carried, with him. So yeah, it was on I shared him on Facebook, and it really was a high point for Eliza, to see the one of the founding partners break free. So the sad part came in where we could not come alongside him, because where we're at organizational wise, we don't have the resources to disciple him. Like, and we did try, so it wasn't that we just left him flat. We it was just not an attainable thing for us at that moment.
We would have liked to we would have liked to have a house for him to stay in where he could get better and receive discipleship over an extended period of time, like a year or so,
Mm-hmm.
and then have moved from that into like work and things like that. And so that's what Paul is talking about, where, he was at this Oxford house, and he's caught in between two worlds, right?
Right.
It's hard. For those of you who might not know, Oxford houses require you to go and get work, so that you can pay rent. But he had a sponsor, so he didn't need to pay the pay the rent himself. Like, a family was helping him with that, And because of his heart condition, it wasn't easy for him to go out and get work. And so he's kind of an idle body
Mm-hmm.
who I'm not sure if they said he was allowed to be in the house or not, but usually you're allowed to, they kick you out of the house and like, yo, you got to go look for a job from like 9 to like 3 p.m. or something like that.
Yeah,
And so,
they did. I think make him leave at near the end. I think so. I don't know for sure.
yeah, so, but essentially the place he's in is he's caught in the middle of something. Everyone he knows is in addiction and homeless. And those are his friends. Like, they're not just
It's his family.
smoking buddy. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, like
yeah.
he's lived with these people for months, if not years at this point. And so he's those are the people he knows. He doesn't really know anybody else on the outside. He has us, but I mean, he's a grown man, right?
Yeah.
So we can't make him do anything. And like Paul said, that we did try to disciple him, and we put our best foot forward, but it didn't go the way we had dreamed of it going. And so it was a wild ride for that season. Something you want to say?
Oh, I was just saying that he we did engage with him, and the problem was the distance. So so if we could have got a foothold with him, but so to back up a little bit, when we had our other episode, we were talking about trauma bonds. Those are very strong. It's just kind of like, imagine you were on an airplane with somebody and it crashed and you survived and you saw that person, you would forever be bonded with that person over that event. Well, homelessness is 10 times worse, believe it or not. So those trauma bonds, I would say they're stronger than your actual family. So as you saw how I kind of let a person know this weekend that he passed, I mean, it was traumatic. I mean, I don't know how to explain it other than homelessness is an experience that it's very, very deep inside somebody's psyche. And when two people are in that together, they are family. So,
For sure. I mean, the person we told, it was like her son had died. I
yeah.
mean,
Oh, yeah. Oh,
it
yeah.
was it was like the exact.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly the same reaction, and
Yeah.
of course, but just for anyone who's like, well, do they really have friends out there and things like that? Yeah, you've got your best friends out there. It's like
Yeah.
being at war, but
Yeah.
all of the time.
Yeah.
Like you're always in this high stress situation, and you're looking out for each other and things like that. It can be difficult and kind of hard to deal with. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what we saw with that. Yeah, and so that really was like a catalyst for us, because that's when things like being able to put people safely into addiction recovery homes got put on our roadmap, where it's just kind of this thing dealing with homelessness. There's addiction in homelessness. It might not be everyone's addicted to something, but it might not be everyone, but a lot of people are,
Yeah.
especially in our area. The ones that we've engaged with in Raleigh, we're seeing almost exclusively that.
Yeah.
And so let's just be real about it. And so then, like, as we reach out, it starts with food, and of course they need Jesus, so you add that in. And then someone's like, okay, I'm ready to change my life, or God puts them in a situation where it's like, change your life or die. And so
Right.
then, I mean, let's just be real.
Yeah.
And so then you've got you're like, okay, I'm going to change my life. What do I do now, Paul? Either one of us, and we're like, you should watch this Adrian Rogers video, because that's what I can do for you right now. And it's not it's not it's not that the Adrian Rogers video isn't fantastic. It is. He's a good preacher.
Yeah.
But it's not housing them and giving them a full on Jesus exclusive diet for 24/7.
Yeah.
Because people are getting we don't know the influences he had at the Oxford home, but you can be an atheist and get clean after a decade. Like, you can be addicted to drugs get clean and not come to Jesus. I think Jesus will make it easier.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think you'll only have real life forever in
Yeah.
Jesus. But you can accomplish a hard thing without him. Of course, through his grace, because he's the one who allows you to do it, whether you know it or not. He lets the rain fall and the sun shine
Yeah.
on the wicked. Anyways. So yeah, that's why we're like, well, we need something where we can train these people and get them out and guide them all the way through. Because when we're reaching out to the population that we're reaching out to, it's just a fact of life. And so we do have hopes. I wouldn't call them plans yet, but
Yeah.
we do have hopes of being able to be or at least, even if it's not us doing everything, we want to be the middleman at least. So when the next person is like, because this was number 2, because Khalif was number 1,
Mm-hmm.
and so Khalif went to an addiction recovery home. That didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
Brad comes out, goes to an addiction recovery home. That doesn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever number 3 is, we want to be ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want to like bolt the door when they go in and stay out in the yard with a shotgun. So
And a Bible.
yeah.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
so he and this is actually when things kind of take a turn for the negative, because he kind of goes dark on us.
Yeah. Yeah. I was seeing signs, and I had said something to you and you're like, no, don't be so, no, no, no. And I was like, I don't know, man. And
Yeah, so Paul was like, I don't know if he's maintaining sobriety, because Brad was smart, man. Brad
yeah.
would
Oh
have
yeah.
killed it in sales if he just
Oh
made
yeah.
it. If he
Yeah,
just made it
yeah.
to a car dealership, bro,
Yeah.
or a tech job, he would have made millions. I'm telling you, bro.
Mm-hmm.
Just put him at a Chevy dealership, and everybody's got a Silverado within 2 weeks, man. He was such a good talker, and because of that, we eventually became suspicious. Guy go much faster than me, because I'm an optimist through and through. Nothing ever goes wrong in my plans. Oh, we'll do X, then we'll do Y, then we'll do Z, then we'll be done. Like, that's it every single time. And he's like, I think he could be doing this or this. And I was like, that is ludicrous. That is so much effort. There's no way. It's impossible. And then that's when we start getting stories from some of the homeless population. So I'll let you talk for a little bit, Paul, about how you can go into as much detail as you want, but you go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the first dead giveaway was the he was still in contact with the family, so to speak. And that, in addiction, we know that's the first step, is you have to break those old paths, those old connections with friends. I mean, even when you're saved for Christ, you have to break some of those old bonds with your friends, and that was the red flag number 1. So that's where I was like, oh yeah, this is not good. So I brought it to his attention immediately, and you were there. I kind of was like, well, what if, and I used a hypothetical name, was doing that. He was like,
Ricky.
yeah, I was like, I used Ricky. I was like, Brad, what would you say to Ricky? And he would say, I would tell him, don't go back there. And I said, well, you're Ricky. So,
Yeah, because me, him, and Brad, that was so funny, because we were sitting in like a church event and we were the last ones to leave. Like, they had to do the "you can go now" announcement because of only us, which was funny. And so we're sitting there talking with him, and we're like, you're a couple months clean now, you're in the Oxford home. Tell us, what is the first thing you would say to someone who's escaping addiction? And he was like, oh, well, just, you got to stay out of it, man. You can't be messing around with the same folk. You got to separate yourself, yada, yada, yada. And we're like, okay, what about you? And at this point, he's admitted, like, yeah, I've been around, yada, yada. He's like, but I'm different because,
yeah.
and we're like, no, you're not. So that was a good night. That was a good night. It was a lot of emotions, a lot of ups and downs, but
Yeah,
man.
For me, it was about a week or 2 after that. I was right there, right at that same place, but at a gas station, and I saw a really, really bad off young lady, and she obviously was homeless and struggling. And so I went over and I said, "Can I pray for you?" I sat down on the curb, and she started crying and saying she lost her son, and that's usually what happens. So when you meet these people, they're very, very cunning. Like she went right for my heart, and I was like, "Oh, that's so sad. Have you heard of a guy named Brad?" "Yeah, I seen him over there, and he's got tattoos, right?" And I was like, "Oh boy." So that was, I went over there to pray for her. Obviously, that was my intention. But while I was there, I was like, maybe I should gather some intel. And, she had said that he said he was clean. And, I do believe Brad was actively fighting. So that's one thing I will say. He, even when he was getting better, he was telling me he was microdosing, and he had taken it from way down from like 1.5 grams to, a quarter of a gram. And anybody that's used, they know that's a huge difference in strength. So he was trying very hard. So, that's one thing that I will say about Brad is he was a fighter, and he was fighting all the way to the end.
Hey guys, this one is going to go a little long, so we're going to cut it in half and come back next week for part 2.